It's so funny that tomorrow the fascists will vote with the left to collapse the government in France. Can I be honest with you? They deserve it. Macron deserves it. Are you kidding me? Macron gets BTFO'd in the EU election, so he calls a snap election, which only gets saved because the left rapidly organizes to bring everyone together and coordinates with with Macron's Liberal Party to try to save as many seats as they can. And then in spite of that, Macron backstabs the left by not affirming their parliamentary pick, even though the left literally saved his ass. I have no confidence in Macron either. He's invited the fascists into government on a red carpet.
They have significant...
This doesn't depose Macron, it deposes Prime Minister. You're right, sorry. The liberal, right, yeah, the people they put in... Sorry, the Macron-backed, like, compromise person they put in, because remember when they said they wouldn't put forward a member of the leftist parliament because it would immediately get, like, they would immediately face a no-confidence vote? Well, look what happens. What happens when you cross an earnest, hardworking, leftist French party with a president and Liberal Party underneath him who refuse to cooperate with leftists to keep out fascists? You get what you fucking deserve! I mean, I'm sorry that the Liberals' only political position is to carry on with the insanely unpopular austerity policies of the like, what is it, like raising the retirement age to, you know, up by 2 or 3 years, the welfare cuts. So Horseshoe is right when he... It's not horseshoe theory. The Liberals have completely France. Macron literally worked with fascists to keep leftists out of power after leftists saved the Liberals from the consequences of Macron's snap election. And the Liberals are dying on the sword of, we need to put forward the incredibly unpopular austerity policies. Like, it's not horseshoe theory. The Liberals are self-destructing. The only hope we have is that the leftists are able to pull enough of the Liberals towards their side that they take control of the parliament rather than the fascists. But Macron is impeding that process. Wow, the first vote of no confidence ousting since 62. I didn't know that. I didn't realize it'd been that long. Liberals preferring fascism to socialism. Didn't this happen 80 years ago in a different European country? This has happened in like a bunch of countries, but it's not about like liberals broadly. Keep in mind, there is a huge difference between liberal voters and liberal members of government. A lot of Macron and his toadies, his cohorts, are liberals in the sense that they're like a thin veneer of neoliberalism dragged over the exact same like institutional uniparty you see with the Democrats, you know? They're liberals in the same way that Hillary Clinton Democrats are liberals. Ultra wealthy, like, you know, East Coast, New York, Wall Street Democrats with the same social circles as the Republicans, but they're like a little less homophobic, but ultimately they're allegiant to capital. They're like Clintonites. Same with Macron. I don't think liberal voters want Le Pen. I think that people like Macron and his toadies answer primarily to, like the Democrats, their consultants and their donors, and that would be the bourgeoisie. And the bourgeoisie historically have almost always sided, when it's expedient, with fascists over leftists, because fascists don't meaningfully challenge them. I thought we don't use those words here. Sorry, something about saying Macron like that makes me want to say bourgeoisie as well. You know? Like, as long as we're doing French, as long as we're engaging in, like, francophone analysis. France's political crisis, brewing over the past 3 months, finally erupted on Monday when Bonnier said he would push the social security component of his fragile government's 2025 budget through parliament without a vote. Man, I wonder why a vote of no confidence is going through. I wonder why this extremely unpopular change to Social Security, so unpopular that they have to force it through without it. I wonder what could possibly lead to this turmoil. Omelette du fromage. That's true. The constitutional measure allowing him to do so, known as Article 49.3, offers MPs the chance to challenge the government's move through a no-confidence motion voted on within 48 hours. Literally, like Macron's toady in Parliament hitting the big red button, I will do something very unpopular, and the only way to stop me is with a no-confidence vote. No! How could the fascists and leftists both vote for put forward the no confidence vote on me. No! Who could have predicted this? Apart from me. Foiled again. Blocking this budget is, alas, the only way the Constitution gives us to protect the French people from a dangerous, unfair, and punitive budget, said Le Pen. Yup. Yorp. Barnier, approved by Macron, after snap June elections returned a lower house divided into 3 roughly equal blocks without a clear majority, tried to win MPs' backing for a belt-tightening budget to restore France's dire finances. His proposals included tax increases and public spending cuts totaling about 60 billion, aimed at reducing the country's public sector deficit to about 5% of GDP, down from 6.1% this year, more than double the ceiling permitted in the Eurozone. Despite a range of concessions from the veteran conservative prime minister, both the left-leaning New Popular Front Alliance and the RN, which together have enough MPs to unseat the government, are both due to present no confidence motions. Nice. That's crazy. I can't believe every government is collapsing right now. Trump is about to take office. Germany is still trying to resolve their crisis following the ousting of that, what was it, finance minister. France is about to have its government dissolved via no confidence for the first time in like 60 years, 65 years. We're in a dark age. We kind of are. It's sort of like we're the wave, you know? Mexico just chilling there. Got to get me some real estate in Mexico City. That's what I need to do. That's crazy. Yeah, 6% of the country's deficit in the GDP is pretty remarkable, I would say. What do they even spend that on? It's all like social spending, right? Like retirement and healthcare and stuff like that. They gotta not privatize. They gotta nationalize their healthcare system properly. What a video feed about this.
Is France broken, and is it broke? Marine Le Pen to join the left and bring down a minority government that was scrambling to stop a spiraling budget deficit. What's the plan for the far-right leader of Parliament's largest opposition party, and for the rest of those who oppose the minority government? We'll ask about a crisis that's been brewing ever since Emmanuel Macron's surprise call of snap elections, which backfired last July, a hung parliament that constitutionally cannot be dissolved again until next summer. With next year's budget yet to be approved, there won't be a U.S.-style shutdown, but it's anyone's guess how a caretaker government limps along.
What is, like, Mélenchon's plan for the budget? Like, what are the proposals by Le Pen and the left to address the deficit, you know, apart from austerity?
With a spiraling deficit. Yes, the hangover from tax breaks and COVID-era subsidies has France borrowing at a higher cost than Greece for a brief moment earlier in the day, and with an opposition that wants no part of belt-tightening, and neighboring Germany also in political...
Raise taxes here. I don't want you to answer that question if you don't know, so you just providing question mark like half... Like, I don't want the real answer to be ruined with the people who are just saying shit.
Economic
Does anyone have an article on that?
The euro is falling, and it's all of the continent that just might have a problem. Today in the France 24 debate, Le Pen and the left are set to topple the Barnier government. With us, Eleonore Carrois, member of the French Parliament from Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Socialist Paris Municipal Councillor Boris Jamet-Fournier.
Happy to be here.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see journalist Gérald Olivier, also research fellow at the IPSE.
On the left, we have a huge plan to raise taxes and reorient public spending away from public subsidies. Can you get me an article where they describe that plan? I don't know enough about the specifics of how money is spent by the French government to make any confident assertions there, but I would love to see, like, where that's coming from.
A think tank.
IPSE, yeah. IPSE in French.
IPSE in French.
Institut Prospective et Sécurité en Europe.
Okay.
Institute of Prospective and Security in Europe. Thank you for inviting me.
Francesco Saracino is professor of macroeconomics at Sciences Po Paris. Good to see you as well. By the way, you can catch the show on the go. You can listen to the France 24 debate wherever.
Okay, so the fascists say fiscal restraint, pro-business stance. Okay. Cut deficit to 3% of GDP by 2027. Good luck. Encourage business cuts. Okay, so the fascists have no plan, and they're just opposing the liberal austerity because they don't want to take ownership of the fact that they also want austerity. Can I get a non-French plan for Mélenchon?
Podcasts are streamed. Yes, the Prime Minister's pulled the trigger. Michel Barnier invoking Article 49.3 of the French Constitution, turning the 2025 spending bill on Social Security into a decree, thus exposing his government to a vote of no confidence. The veteran conservative had made a final concession to the far right by scrapping subsidy cuts for over-the-counter medicines, but it wasn't enough.
You hear, I know, in your constituencies, French people who want and expect stability and a clear picture for their businesses and daily life. Particularly at a time when, and I know what I'm talking about, our country has to defend its interests in Europe
Subscribe to read.
and across the world. This is why, on the basis of Article 49.3, I have decided to commit my government to pushing
Left-wing official economic policy. Can you think of one issue with linking this to me? Like, come on. Here's France 24. Yeah, France 24 translates a ton of shit into English, okay? The NFP plans to raise the monthly minimum wage, impose price ceilings on essential food, electricity, gas, and petrol, repeal Macron's deeply unpopular decision to raise the retirement age 64, invest massively in green transition public services. People say this won't work. The NFP has moved quickly to show the public that its numbers add up. During the bloc's first 3 years in government, officials from the left-wing party said in a joint press conference Friday, public revenues would rise first by 30 billion euros in 2024. Tax the company's super profits. Yeah, okay. The RN isn't explaining how it plans to fund its program. The NFP has been very clear.
It's time now for a look at today's business news with Brian Quinn.
Business policies. After Philippe came, that has businesses worried. France 24 spoke with Christopher Dombic from Pictet Asset Management about just that. Take a listen here.
The economic situation is pretty bad, really. Businesses are going bankrupt left and right, and the budgetary situation is in real trouble. There was a recent Senate report that painted a catastrophic picture of state finances. And for businesses, this is a real issue because when the state's finances are in trouble, that could mean tax hikes for them and cuts to subsidies.
Now, the president of that top employers union has actually called out the left coalition and the far right for their spending plans.
Yes, indeed. The president of MEDEF, Patrick Martin, gave an interview to conservative French newspaper Le Figaro on Wednesday, in which he warned that the left-wing coalition New Popular Front's spending plans would mean 200 billion euros, he claimed, in extra spending per year. Now, many economists have disputed that figure, putting it closer to 100 billion, still a large figure. The plan includes raising the country's minimum wage by 200 euros, indexing all salaries to inflation, repealing President Macron's highly unpopular retirement and unemployment reforms, and essentially ignoring EU budgetary rules that we were talking about before. Some economists believe the NFP's plan is achievable, especially if they undid some of Macron's tax cuts for the wealthy, as well as fought.
Wow, what a shock. It's like the most unthinkable idea in the world. Leftist candidates propose, what if we taxed wealthy people to finance society? Here we've brought on a resident billionaire who goes on every single talk show to explain his positions and beliefs, why this won't work. The fact that Macron put through tax cuts given France's dire financial situation is insane. Much like the Democrats here in America, if Le Pen takes control of France, it will be on Macron. It will be 100%. I have no blame whatsoever to give to the left. The Macron rolled out the red carpet for them. It is entirely on him.
Through legislation for the Social Security budget for 2025.
Nous avons toujours dit et considéré que punir les Français.
We have always said that it is unacceptable to punish the French for what their leaders did. That is why we're lodging a motion of no confidence against the government.
What was it like, Eleanor Carrois, at the National Assembly? We've seen a lot of drama ever since this new parliament's come about. How would you characterize this Monday?
Well, it was a difficult Monday because obviously the decision to trigger Article 49.3 and the censorship that will most likely come in a few days.
On Wednesday.
Creates a lot of uncertainty and questioning about what will happen next. And there is one thing that strikes me is that the left and the far right will vote together to censor the government, but without proposing an alternative. And this has been the case for months already. We know that this has to be a compromised budget. We know that every single party will not have all of their desires, all of their policies transflicted in this budget, but ultimately we need to have a budget. So a lot of uncertainty and questioning about what will happen next.
Boris Jamais-Fournier, do you agree with that there hasn't been counter proposals?
I do not agree with Eleanor. I'm sorry, because who created this uncertainty is President Macron by calling the snap election, as you mentioned, in July. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into, and the reality of the story is that we got ourselves into a mess. And let me ask you a question, Francois. Is France a democracy? It is, right? Well, in what country that is a democracy, the person who comes in fourth in an election, which happened with the Conservative Party, embodied by Mr. Barnier, becomes the prime minister? That's literally what happened. The Conservatives came in fourth, and disregarding the historical precedents of the Fifth Republic, President Macron appointed a conservative as prime minister, disregarding the fact that the French people had voted for the left, who came in.
This guy's spitting. He looks like he's wearing a bird's nest, and his suit doesn't fit him, but he's spitting. This is how I imagine, like, when you see a guy like this, you have to trust him. Because this is the kind of like crank appearance that you associate with libertarians or socialists, depending on like the specific, you know what I mean?
First in the snap election.
Can I respond? Because obviously we've heard this over and over again, and I understand you came first and you don't have a majority. You're 100 seats far from a majority, so you're really far from anywhere close to a majority. But you came in first, and you wanted to be to have a prime minister. But this is old story. What happens next is, what do we deal with our country? What budget will we have? How will what will the pensions be? What would the tax be in a year? And right now, am I happy with every single line in that budget? Obviously not. Is my party, the party where I come from, which is obviously not the party of the prime minister, deciding what the budget will look like? Obviously not.
The far right
but we do actually, because the socialists didn't want to take part in it. If you would take part into this coalition, and if it were a real coalition as in other European countries, then we wouldn't have the far right deciding what's right and what's wrong. And
this is absolute bullshit. The left was willing to work with the liberals. That was the reason that the liberals got saved during the snap election. The leftists like busted their ass, making sure that Le Pen's party didn't take more seats than she could. Like, they worked with him. Macron has been shutting out the left at every opportunity. What concessions has Macron made to Mélenchon or to the left? Genuine question. What genuine outreach has been made here? I'm sure there are some minor things. In a meaningful sense?
Ultimately, what we see is that the far right doesn't have a spine, that what they do is that they're going to censor anyways, because when you look at what they ask for and what there is in the budget, they'll censor anyway. So I really think it's a lack of responsibility from the left that takes us to this position.
Why not just oppose the incredibly unpopular raise in retirement age? How does that logic make any sense? The liberals, who do not control a majority of parliament, the conservative finance minister, who was appointed spitefully by Macron, they are putting forward something incredibly unpopular that can only be opposed by a vote of no confidence. How the hell is the vote of no confidence that happens as a product of that the fault of the people who don't support it?
Kind of vague what we heard, that clip from Marine Le Pen. She said you don't want to punish the French for what their leaders did. What is she referring to exactly?
That I'm not sure, but clearly the problem with France today is that whoever claims to have won those snap elections does not have a majority. And the fact is the left claimed to have come first. Technically it didn't. It was a union of three different leftist parties that all together came ahead of the National Front, or National Rally, as we call it. The party that got the most vote on the first round of election was the National Rally. And the fact that
the only reason that didn't take place in the second round of votes is because the liberals and leftists coordinated and formed like a hasty coalition.
Could involve the National Rally seems to me only justified. The problem is no one is willing to work with them. So Macron found a way to work without them, but not totally against them, until time comes to vote a budget with which they disagree, which is where we are today.
Is there any scenario under which there could have been some kind of moment of national unity where everyone could have held their nose to get a budget passed? Or are the French just allergic to coalitions the likes you see in other countries?
At the moment they are, and I think that the ultimate issue is the person responsible for this mess, not the mess of France, but the mess of the last 6 months, is President Macron. And if on Wednesday the government falls and he has to find a new prime minister, he's going to find himself in an impossible situation of either claiming all power. There's an article in the Constitution, Article 16, that would allow him to govern without parliament, or he takes account what just happened and he resigns. And if he resigns, we can have new elections, both for president and for the assembly.
You really think he's going to resign?
No, I don't, but he could.
Okay. Francesca Saracino, the euro is down. The bond yields are up for France. Cost of borrowing is increasing. Markets are worried, but they're not panicked. Should they be panicked?
No, I don't think so. I think there is today an economy which is in far worse position than the French economy in Europe, and this is the German economy. So where our worry should be as economists is more on the German economy. I think markets are acting for once quite rationally. They are, of course, putting some weight on the political instability. So the spreads have gone up, the interest rates have gone up, but not much so actually since July. I mean, we just saw in the past 5 minutes, well, the discussion here. I mean, France has been a total mess since the decision to call for the snap elections, politically speaking. But the French economy is doing fine. Not great, but fine, especially compared to the other European economies. So the problem that France has from an economic point of view is that it kind of...
And you don't sense, by the way, this sense of panic if you're...
No, because there is no reason to. Okay, so there is a big European problem of which France is a large chunk, which is, I mean, Europe needs to decide what they want to be as grown-ups. Okay, so we have China and the United States that are running ahead of us in terms of innovation, in terms of ecological transition, investment, you name it. And Europe is still deciding, should we have a new Green Deal? Should we change the Green Deal? Should we put some money? Should we take some money from welfare and put it on innovation, on defense? So we're still trying to find minor solutions to major problems. But that is a European problem. It's not a French problem. I mean, if I were in Germany, I would be much more worried for the economic situation because
Isn't it? How many seats did it look like Le Pen's party was going to take in the National Assembly after the first round of voting? Didn't it look like they would have enough that they would be able to form the majority government? And how many seats do they have now in the National Assembly? Isn't it like 1/4? Or something like less than 1/4? Like they were going to have a minority majority, and now they have like 120. Yeah. So they went down from it looked like they would be able to single-handedly control the National Assembly. And then they went down to not even being close. Yeah, the media hyped them up so much. The only reason they went from 200 plus predicted seats to like 120 seats is because of the left. The hastily made left coalition in what was a greater act of democratic preservation than anything Macron has presided over in his entire time as president. They rallied with the liberals and worked together to stop fascists. This is like your counter argument to all those smug liberals who are like, well, my only experience with leftists is tankies on Twitter who support Russia. So basically leftists support fascism just as much. Like, there's your counter argument. They put the work in. And since then, all Macron has done is spite them. The insane thing is, here, hold on. If you look at the French parliament and how the seats are distributed today, the far right would not even be a threat if Macron and the centrist coalition would just work with the left. If they had a front against the fascists, it wouldn't even be an issue. The Ensemble coalition has like 160 seats, and the new Popular Front has like 200 seats. Together, around 350 seats, or a vast majority of the National Assembly. Significantly more than they need. And it seems like the only reason the far right even have a voice in this discussion is because Macron and the finance minister that he appointed, who was conservative, and his Ensemble coalition won't work with them. Just work together, very American take, no offense. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that when your country is on the precipice of being taken over by a literal fascist, I think that liberals should work with leftists. Because leftists work with liberals in the second round of voting during the snap election. The liberals can't accept in the compromise they would be the junior partner. Yeah? Yeah, basically. The liberals should be the junior partner. People don't like them. They have fewer seats. Why do they get to be the senior partner? Why do they get to make all the decisions? They're objectively less popular. 46 seats in the Senate, 159 in the National Assembly, versus the New Popular Front's 98 seats in the Senate, 193 seats in the National Assembly. Why the should the liberals be the ones with the loudest voice? They're now the ones collapsing the government. Just insane.
German economic situation is much more serious because Germany has today, let's say, an economic structure which is very much out of sync with the current times.
And the most likely scenario...
Yes, Hercules, you're completely correct. As far as we know, Macron was not the one who was directing the Ensemble coalition to work with leftists in the second round of voting after the snap election. As far as we know, Macron was sitting with his thumb up his French asshole while lower-level party members and leaders within the Ensemble coalition worked with leftists. Macron has been nothing but oppositional.
Which is rolling over this year's budget, which already is got a lot of red ink in it in terms of, because we share a currency with...
but that is also something we should relativize. Of course, nobody would argue that running forever 6% deficit is normal. Nobody should argue that you should increase debt always in every situation. But still, today...
Macron literally told some candidates to not drop out and some defied his order in the second round. Christ.
The French public finances are not in a situation of disarray. Okay, so there is a lot of time. There is time to put the house in order, and while at the same time focusing on other priorities. One thing, as a foreigner, I've been living in France for 20 years, but I still consider myself a foreigner. One thing that struck me in the past 6 months, the only and one issue we have been discussing has been the budget. Mm. No more discussion on industrial policy, no more discussion on what to do for China and the United States, no more discussion.
There's even rumors he prayed for a far-right victory of the snap election, only to hope they would make such a mess they would delegitimize themselves. That's the dream of every liberal, that they're the only adult in the room, even though everything's getting worse under their rule, and that somebody else can take the steering wheel for a second to find out just how hard they have it, Just how, like, oh, wow, look, it's not so easy running France, is it? And then everyone will race back to them. Biden's basically doing the same thing right now. You know that, right? How spiteful he's been?
Where to put the money, the investment that is needed for the ecological transition. That completely disappeared from the political landscape of France. Now, let me ask you, is a 6% deficit a more important challenge than the fact that 95% of imports of solar panels as of today come from China? For me, no. For me, the real priority should be how to
reindustrialize.
Fight, it's a strong word, how to engage our competitors in the industrial transition, in the ecological transition. That should be the real priority. That disappeared for the past 6 months from the French political debate.
I have to agree with you, but actually we do discuss about these issues, but the one thing that everyone is focused on is the budget. And the past 6 months, if you look at what has happened, after the snap election, there was a long period of forming the government, and then they were right into the budgetary discussion. And the reason why it's so important to have a budget, be it not a perfect budget, but a budget nonetheless, is because all the measures that we've been discussing for agriculture, for strengthening the justice and police system, responding to the people's priorities, which we've heard during the European elections and then again during the snap elections, need to be budgetized somehow. And agreed, not perfect, but we need a budget that is different from the budget we had last year. I think we can agree on that.
It really is crazy how even in like the fascist imagination, like in America, for example, Make America Great Again, they point to the 1950s. And then you take a look at top tax brackets over time in like every single country. Remember how America had that like giant industrial boom back during the 40s and 50s that pulled us out of the Great Depression and also introduced the greatest era of prosperity ever experienced by a major country in the history of humanity? Yeah, top tax bracket around that time was like hovering around 80 to 90% thereabouts, you know? Oh, you take a look at France during their, the UK over here, 98% in the top tax bracket, helped them rebuild after the war. Germany, right over here. Even through the Nazis, they had a higher tax bracket, but it went up after the Nazis were ousted, you know, have to rebuild. France, likewise, higher over here. And then, been going down. Though in France, admittedly, it's still quite a bit higher than it is in the other countries. Macron passed a tax cut, did he not? What was that? Brought the corporate tax rate down from 33% to 25%. Like, this entire budgetary crisis was created by Macron. In 2017, the deficit was 2.6% of the GDP. Now it's 6.1%. It's more than doubled. The deficit, not just the debt, the deficit, the amount spent over has more than doubled under Macron. These are the neoliberals. These are the like responsible financiers. You cut the corporate tax rate, government spending skyrockets, and then he's like, oh, I have a solution. I'll raise the age of retirement so people have to work longer. That'll work. When Emmanuel Macron came to power in 2017, he was hailed as the business-friendly former Rothschild banker who would turn France into a world-beating investment destination by slashing public spending and lower taxes. You're telling me trickle-down economics doesn't work? God, I wish I had found this out sometime in the past 50 years. You're telling me that the guy whose job it is to preside over a financial system that strips things of their value and then leaves them in ruin so they can encourage investors to get in on something new for a quick pump and dump? You're telling me that attitude doesn't work well for preserving nations? Running a country like a business when the primary business strategy in the era of private equity is to buy a failing business, run it into the ground, liquidate it, sell the assets, and then leave it to ruin. Jesus Christ. Evolution of France's public finances under Macron. Hey, neoliberals, why do you keep ruining countries? Why do you keep pretending to be the voice of reason in the room and then this keeps happening? Reagan ballooned the damn deficit too. almost like fiscal conservatism is bullshit? How dare you suggest that? I mean, I know that Keynesian economics like pulled America out of the Great Depression and seems to work consistently more or less every time it's applied sensibly. And there's a huge amount of economic data and like historical precedent suggesting that extensive government spending can actually stimulate market growth and lead to a more prosperous economy that everyone benefits from. You can't say that. You can't do that. Because that might make life more prosperous for everyone, but it doesn't allow 5 people to run half your economy. Keynesianism runs directly opposite that trend because it means heavy government involvement in spending and a lot of taxation.
But was cutting pensions for retirees a priority for the French people in the last election? Was cutting budget for a public hospital?
But that's not what you have in this budget that has been presented.
Well,
that's not what you have in the budget that was shown.
Cutting budget for local government with a 5 billion slash that Michel Barnier wanted initially in this budget.
Well, but it wasn't in the copy that we saw.
I feel like what you see in this budget are not priorities that were expressed by the French people when elections happened.
What Michel Barnier tried to do, and I would agree that it wasn't perfect again, was to discuss with every single group to see what their priorities are, as you would do in a coalition. And what struck me, and again...
He put forward a no-vote proposal that could only be challenged with votes of no confidence. How can you claim that he was trying to solicit the advice and approval of everyone when he went for the move you go for when you don't have people's approval?
And is not against you or against your party. But what struck me is that there were parties, a coalition named the NFP, that said from the beginning, from the outset, no matter what you say, no matter what you propose, we're not going to take part in this discussion because the Prime Minister comes from the right and he's not legitimate. I can hear that, but I think it's not responsible, honestly.
To be honest, though...
How is this their fault?
Olivier Faure, the head of the Parti Socialiste, wrote to the Prime Minister just
a couple
of days ago.
Yesterday.
Yeah, with a list of demands. That's a bit late,
isn't it?
And they had a number of meetings, of interviews. Yes, they did.
They were invited and they decided not to participate.
Boris Vallaud did talk to the Prime Minister just a few days.
They were even invited to be part of the government, and you said, no, we don't want to take part in this. And I think that's not responsible.
All right, so markets worried but not spooked by the gridlock in...
I like how everyone has their bit. The guy with the bird nest hair is like, what if we made the country better? The woman is like, well, actually, it's everyone's but the liberals' fault that the liberals are doing things that are unpopular and leading to the collapse of the government. And this guy's like, my portfolio, let's talk more about that. Yeah, I'm concerned about the state of the stock market. Let's get into, let's get into the nitty gritty on that. Yeah, these characters are well written. They have very distinct archetypes. So it's the left's fault for not wanting to be cucked after St. Macron. It's not even about the dignity of the left. It's about the will of the voters. Macron and his coalition are very unpopular. The people voted in leftists. So yes, that interest should be represented in Parliament through the Prime Minister and through the bills that he passes. Choosing a conservative prime minister when conservatives were such an unpopular slice of the overall electorate within the National Assembly is an insult, not only to the leftists in the coalition, but also to the voters, to the French people who hate Macron, and Macron hates them, and it shows.
Parliament striking taxi drivers in the south of France this Monday. They're spooked. They're more worried about a reduction in a government subsidy that allows them to ferry certain patients to and from hospital.
Okay. What? Okay.
The social security bill they want to pass is going to harm us, and a lot of us are going to end up out of business.
So a carve-out demanded by those taxi drivers near Carpentras in the south of France. Gérald Olivier, there's two ways of looking at that clip if you're abroad. On the one hand, it's in Paris, have they forgotten the little guy? And the other way of looking at it is to say, well, the French don't want to pay the piper after so long getting state help.
Yeah, if it was just one handout. We have one corporation here, but there's actually hundreds technically. And the real problem behind the budget, and you're discussing very technical aspects. But at some point, even if the debt is not as bad as some people think it is, at some point, that's what you have to look at. You have to look at government expenses.
On a more strategic standpoint, there was literally no reason for Barnier to engage the 49, unless he knew that the unpopular liberal spending or budgetary bill would never go through, and he wanted to collapse the government like this. Unless they knew there was no way through the gridlock without concession, and they weren't willing to make concessions, so he just wants to be able to blame the left and the right, basically doing exactly what this woman is doing. They want to be like, no, our massive unpopularity, lack of the public will, and our like completely unworkable budgetary measures, all of that, it's not in us anymore, because it's them who did the vote of no confidence, even though they had literally no other option to stop the bill. It's their fault.
And government revenues. And France is a country where people have been taxed
the vote
to
hasn't
death
happened
for
yet.
certain decades after
We'll
decades
see.
after decades. And at some point, the little people, the people who pay the taxes, even though they get some money back.
I like that you genuinely tweak in your audience. Thank you. It helps that I'm sick, so I'm like more irritable. But yeah, no, it's an important. You have to stay humble, and by stay humble, I mean get angry at people. I maintain. Listen, okay. I think Macron should be a live streamer, because being a little bit resented by your audience and resenting them in kind is the relationship a streamer should have with their audience. Macron's problem is that he's president.
In return, they end up with a lot less than they used to have, which is the real problem that France is having. And that's why what we've seen in the elections has been a drive of the extremes. Macron exploded the system back in 2017, and all the major parties found themselves in shambles. But what came to replace them was the LFI, the radical left on one end, and the National Rally on the other end, on the far right of the spectrum. Nobody will work with them. And from that point on, you have an ungovernable country, which is where we are now.
But is it ungovernable? Because with decrees, with rolling over the budget, the president has a lot of power.
Yes, he has. And he might actually manage to govern without a parliament, which is basically what we've had.
That's what he wants anyways.
All right. I think we get the gist of this.